I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
If Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
Lately, we have been staying away from spoiler reviews. They just don't do all that well for us, to be honest, but this is one that we could not pass up.
So we actually have a lot of things to discuss about Joker. I mean, there's some fan theories, and of course the overall movie itself. Quite a character piece that we saw. Something really different, the game changer in the comic book genre. Could this be something that really changes the genre and the landscape of comic books? Currently, the Joker has made $93 million domestically for its opening weekend for a rated R comic book movie. That is gangbusters right there. Actually, in general, a rated R movie, that is fantastic. What does that mean? Does that mean people have been craving to see this movie? Did all the hype, did all the marketing for Joker really just land for everybody? The overseas numbers, the overseas critics hyping it up, the words masterpiece being thrown around, did that build it up? Was it worth the watch?
This is definitely going to be one that I'm going to have to watch a couple times to really be able to understand everything that was going on in this movie. And I think for me and for my personal taste is what makes certain movies very enjoyable. When you walk out of the theater after first watch going, okay, that was interesting. And I was still processing. When we were doing our non-spoiler review, I was still processing a lot of what had happened. I think it's definitely going to take a couple more views for me to really just delve deep into all the details of this fantastic movie. As you mentioned, now Joker sits at $234 million worldwide, the $93.5 million domestically, smashing the October record for opening weekend. And from what I could find, the estimated production budget on this is roughly $55 million. As we have mentioned in videos before, maybe this is kind of the realm that certain studios can play in, like Warner Brothers, to have a low budget film and has just kind of a very basic storyline, but gritty and really just brings people in, and bam, now you're crushing box office records, and your production budget was $55 million. So well done by the Joker.
But is this storyline that basic? Well, before recording, I actually saw a video by Jeremy Jahns talking about theories for the Joker. What could that mean? And I actually saw a lot of other videos on YouTube saying ending explained for Joker, and I'm like, why the hell do you need an ending explained for the Joker? It's pretty straightforward, I thought. But then you start hearing about some of these theories. When you start piecing it together from what happened in the movie, it starts becoming more possible than not. And some of these theories come about that his kind of psychosis, his mental state, and how he was imagining things, it was all in his head. Like when he was on the Murray Franklin show, when he's hooking up with Zazie Beetz' character, all that turns out it's just a fantasy drummed up in his head, caused either by the medication he's taking, his terrible upbringing, all of that encompassed, society destroying him. Could that have just made a complete fabrication of the story? Is the things that happened to him in the movie, are some of them over-exaggerated, like the kids attacking him and taking his sign? That was something that was brought up in that Jeremy Jahns video that I thought was very interesting. Could he have just stolen the sign? Could that even have happened? Do we know that if that even happened? I mean, he had the bruises on his back. Could that have happened some other way? The guy that gives him the gun? We see the guy give him the gun. But then that guy kind of has a weird reaction to when he starts saying, you're the one that gave me the gun. And he's like, stop talking out your ass. Could he have gotten the gun somewhere else? Could this have all just been a way for him to justify his heinous crimes? I think this theory takes this movie to a much higher level than any of us could even understand, and I have no idea if that's even a possibility. It gave me a little bit of an idea of Sucker Punch, how she thinks she's in a brothel or a dancing burlesque type thing, but really she's in an insane asylum. If it turns out in any way that you can prove that theory right, the Joker just skyrockets to one of the greatest movies of all time.
I think just the discussion of the theories alone makes this movie so much more compelling And that was one thing we talked about in our non-spoiler review, a little bit about some of the twists that were in this movie. And the one part where it was very eye-opening in terms of, holy shit, maybe he's just envisioning some of this on his own, and this isn't actually happening, this isn't reality, is when Arthur is in Zazie Beetz' apartment. I can't remember what her actual character's name is, and she goes, "You're Arthur from down the hall, right?" As soon as she said that, I was like, holy shit. He just totally made all that stuff up in his head. And then you start going back, and as Jeremy Jahns had pointed out, I didn't even think to go back even further to some of the other stuff with the bullying and things like that pushed him over the edge, that maybe that isn't real. Maybe that was just all made up in his head. And what aspects of this movie were made up? What aspects of this movie were made up? Was it certain things to justify his killing? Or was the entire thing just made up in his head, and he's not actually really the Joker, and none of that stuff happened? It was just completely in his head, and that's what makes this entire thing so compelling. And really, you want to peel back some of the layers and go, okay, what is real and what isn't? It just makes it so much more fascinating.
Yeah. So what the premise of that theory is that psychiatrist we see at the end, this could be him just explaining that story the whole time. The theory is just intense. What elements did Arthur really just fabricate to justify some of the things that he did in the movie? Maybe he killed those Wall Street kids just for the shits and giggles of it, instead of them actually even attacking him. I mean, what is real in that movie? And when he gets those notes from the insane asylum about his mother, and he's reading them, and they're going over him and going back to her, like, oh, he was such a happy boy because of the tick he got now from laughing when he's sad or nervous. Who knows what his mental capacity is? Who knows what medicine he was taking? Those pills can lead to an even stronger mental disorder.
For me alone, I think I would prefer the movie to actually had happened, because it is, at the end of the day, a Joker movie, but maybe it happens a little bit differently than what the viewer is seeing, the way that Arthur is kind of perceiving some things. And I brought up some very nitpicky things in our non-spoiler review that actually, if they happened a little bit differently, would kind of explain a lot of it. One of the things that I felt was very odd was if he's incredibly poor and unemployed, why does he have this beautiful red suit? Also, why are some of his lights still on? I thought at some point maybe his power was going to get turned off. He was going to be living without food. When he clears out that entire refrigerator, there looks to be a lot of food in there. Those were a couple just very nitpicky things that I had in my mind. If he is living this a little bit differently than we are actually seeing it, that's what really kind of helps clarify a lot of that stuff. Of maybe it happened a little bit differently, maybe some of the stuff did happen, but again, I think for me, I would prefer that it did happen and it wasn't just something thought up in his head, because then you'd really have the Joker. You don't really have the death of Bruce Wayne's parents, all that stuff that really tied into the DC world and the DC comics, and kind of bringing all of that together. That was one thing that I really enjoyed that they touched a lot on, was that yes, this is the Joker. It's not just some guy in clown makeup that happens to maybe be in Gotham City and they just mention it once. You get kind of how the Joker influences the guy who ultimately kills the Waynes, which I find fascinating, and I enjoy that aspect of it. So if all of that was wiped out, I think maybe I'd be a little frustrated with the film, but just the fact that it's up there for interpretation is what makes this movie so awesome.
But one day I will say what we think and what we meant when we were writing it, which I think is important, but not now. I like that, again, you could view this movie in many different ways.
Yeah, that kind of goes into my next thing. It's like you have this completely unreliable narrator, and
right.
We're talking about, I mean, me and my friend that saw it, the only person I can really talk to it about right now, we're like, what did you think? Did you think this really happened? Will you ever reveal what you were thinking?
Yeah, I will one day, but I think in the far future, it's fun to sort of go back in and because you don't want to hamper what other people's experiences, and certainly, you don't want to hamper other theories that might arise from it. But again, I think it's what makes the movie intriguing.
The Wayne's death, I believe, is real. It's just those things that happen to Arthur are the things that you wonder whether or not they're real or not. Those are the elements that become tricky with his mental status. Some of the elements of the movie, though, the overall arcing story, the base premise anyway of the Joker also has that same kind of feeling that we got during The Dark Knight Rises when Catwoman says this to Bruce Wayne.
I take what I need from those who have more than enough. I don't stand on the shoulders of people with less.
Robin Hood.
I think I do more to help someone than most of the people in this room. Than you.
I think maybe you're assuming a little too much.
Maybe you're being unrealistic about what's really in your pants other than your wallet.
Ouch.
You think all this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. You and your friends better batten down the hatches, because when it hits, you're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
In The Joker, you see this true disconnect from the disenfranchised and the uber rich. The rich are literally inside this movie theater watching Charlie Chaplin, while disenfranchised individuals are outside rioting. The disconnect between the two classes of people is more evident than ever than that scene. And it shows how Gotham can descend into that chaos, and all they needed was just a little push. That's what makes this movie so fascinating. And it just really dived into those elements, that story of class and how those people that are above us are oblivious and clueless to all the matters that the normal folk are dealing with.
Absolutely. I like the discussion of the two classes. I also like the discussion of mental health and how society could also add to that for an individual if some of these things happen the way that they did. It really gets the gears kind of turning. I know when a lot of the stuff that came out at the very beginning, you know, some of the rumors and how we thought this movie was going to unfold, I was unsure, I guess I should say, in terms of if I was going to like the approach of society pushing an individual to become the Joker, very similar to The Killing Joke, or I would prefer a kind of, as he's mentioned in the comics, a multiple choice background where you really don't know what has happened with him, similar to The Dark Knight. And ultimately, when you kind of get the background of Arthur Fleck, but it's still kind of up in the air. I think that really adds to the movie itself. And I also liked the mental health aspect and how society could impact that, or how some people, it just really adds and kind of gets the gears turning and makes you think.
And his speech during the Murray Franklin show, when he admits that he killed those Wall Street guys. And he talks about how you just walked past me, you don't care about me, society doesn't care about what happens to me or anybody else. It's a very passionate speech. And of course, Joaquin Phoenix just destroys this role.
Oh, absolutely.
In every facet. Of course, there was Oscar buzz going around this. I don't know what the Oscars look at for good acting, but if anybody deserves at least a nomination, it's definitely Joaquin Phoenix when it comes to Best Actor. Now, actually, when we were talking about negatives for the non-spoiler, it was kind of hard to even talk about them, and I really didn't think about any of them, but some did come to mind somewhat recently. And it's not really like a big negative, but it's just something that I observed that I thought was kind of odd beats in the movie. But there is points of levity in the movie. And to me, the way the movie is structured, I really don't feel like this movie should have any levity whatsoever. Because I never even smiled at these. I never laughed at them.
Nor did I.
I kind of thought they threw some of the moments off, actually. There's one part where he's arguing with the cops outside the hospital, and he gets up, flicks his cigarette, says something to them, and slams into the door because it's an exit only. Our theater did laugh when that happened. For us, I kind of thought like, wow, that kind of took the piss out of that moment a little bit. And then when he kills the other clown guy and the midget is trying to get out, he can't reach the latch and he's jumping. And yeah, again, our theater was laughing and he had to go over there and let him out. But you kind of think, was he going to kill him? I guess it did lead up to some kind of a tension moment. Like, was he going to kill him or not? Because he couldn't reach the latch. Did he latch it just so he could trap the midget?
That was something that I had thought, and I kind of chuckled at that moment because I noticed how he latched the top lock long before any of that stuff had happened. And it really stood out to me, and for me, it just kind of led me to believe, okay, maybe they're going to try running out the door and then they're going to pull it open and it's going to be locked. So I felt that was going to be an integral part of that specific scene. I didn't think it was going to be used for humor necessarily. And then what I thought was going to happen is as the little person or whatever they prefer goes over to the door. But when he goes over to the door, I thought that Arthur was going to ultimately end up killing him. that was going to be Arthur's twisted sense of humor. That's what I thought was going to happen. So I did kind of chuckle at ultimately he just lets him go. Again, maybe that is something that was in Arthur's head, because ultimately, don't you think he would have ratted Arthur out? That's just another one of those things.
One other thing, though, we did briefly mention this in the non-spoiler, was the choice of one of the songs, which was Rock and Roll by Gary Glitter. The Hey song, if you don't know what that is. But he's suiting up, you know, he's got his paint on, he's putting on his suit, and they start playing this song, and it's the song you usually get in like a sports movie. And I thought it was really weird, and this is where you see him dancing down the stairs. And then they kind of cut into their own version. I did think that song was just a very odd choice. And again, kind of maybe just Joker-ish is what they were going for.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I thought that was very odd. You know, you see him kind of dancing on the stairs, but then it does turn into kind of a somewhat of a Joker theme. So maybe it kind of worked. But I felt like both Matt and I, we didn't look at each other, but you could just tell we were both like, okay, this is weird. I don't understand this choice, but I guess it works. I'm not really sure the point of having that in the movie, but it worked.
There was also some significant trailer scenes that were removed that I thought were interesting, and some of the behind the scenes videos that we got were removed as well. Small clip where you see it looks like he's at maybe his mother's funeral, which looks like they cut out. Him walking down the hallway holding the flowers in the first trailer was not there. And then some of that behind the scenes footage where we see him in front of Amusement Mile, which is where he was working. And then he's arguing with that one clown that gave him the gun. And they're arguing out in the street. That was removed as well. So it's kind of interesting. I know Todd Phillips talked about he really cut some of the fat out, and he had it down to like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and he kept cutting down. And he feels like, I guess he feels pretty confident in this movie. So I wonder, though, the deleted scenes for this, I wonder if it will add any more context to any theories or anything like that. And one thing I did want to pose to everyone in the comments and Shane, do you think he killed the Zazie Beetz character after he realized that all those thoughts of her were just fantasized?
I think so. I think the way that it happened and kind of transpired, and he does like the kind of hand motion to his head, and then, you know, like with the gunshot, I do think he ultimately kills her, and unfortunately probably her daughter as well. That's just kind of what I was leaning towards based on how he walks out of the apartment, and he has that kind of Joker swagger typically after he's killed someone, and he feels better about himself. So to me, that's what it seemed like.
So I'd like to hear in the comment section, what did you guys ultimately think of Joker? Is this a game changer? Would you like to see other movies like this, like a breakdown of these characters? Did they see Black Label? What do you want to see from this ultimately? Let us know in the comments and what you thought of Joker for sure. In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.